In this presentation, we will review key management lessons we can learn from Paul Levy and the Beth Israel Deaconess case study. It is important to note that there are more than a few lessons that can be learned by thoroughly examining this case. Some are straightforward, quick lessons of the do this variety, like documenting employee behavior, as Levy does with the COO, as described in his March 5th video interview, or calling people out on bad behavior in real time, as Levy does in an email exchange with the Chief of Service and describes in the February 20th video interview, while other lessons are more substantive and complex. Due to time constraints, I have chosen the 3 lessons to present in detail here that I believe are the foundation on which this case rests. These are external pressure, leadership, and management. Lesson 1, external pressure. The first lesson is the one that we have encountered previously, specifically in the Columbia shuttle case, and that is succumbing to external pressure and the impact of doing so. This comes first here because it is arguably the catalyst for the dire situation the Beth Israel Hospital found itself in at the end of the 1990s and into the aughts. At the beginning of the case, we are presented with a picture of Beth Israel Hospital as a high-class academic center known for the quality of its research and teaching, but especially for its quality of care with a community feel. Like 16 other Boston area hospitals, it is a Harvard Medical School partner. We also learn that Beth Israel is having some financial issues, but is a power player in medicine. Nonetheless, it was under considerable pressure by the dean of the medical school to consider a merger with Brigham and Women's Hospital. Pressure mounts, but talks stall. Then Harvard's Business School dean orchestrates an unexpected merger between Brigham and Women's and the Mass General. Rather than alleviating the pressure, BICEO feels greater pressure to merge with the hospital, fearing that the newly formed Brigham-Mass General's merger as Partners Healthcare will negatively impact Beth Israel's share of the market, particularly insurance shares. This external pressure wreaked havoc on Beth Israel leadership decision-making and resulted in a merger with a weak partner, the Deaconess, that neither hospital was ready to make to solve a problem or threat that did not yet exist. This then had a cascading effect which continued to worsen across time with substantial internal turmoil and massive financial losses. We can't know what would have happened had Beth Israel not succumbed to the external pressure, but certainly making decisions based on what others, external to the organization, think is best is not a sound way to make decisions for any organization. Later in the case, we learn from Paul Levy that the care group was even considering bending to the pressure of the Massachusetts Attorney General to sell Beth Israel to a for-profit hospital. Levy makes not doing so a condition of his employ, and while certainly it would have been an easier way out were the sale to happen as part of his turnaround plan, to his credit, Levy did not allow the pressure from the very powerful Massachusetts Attorney General derail what he believed needed to be done to save the BID. Lesson 2, Leadership. When Paul Levy was newly hired at Harvard Medical School as executive dean, he was invited to a 3-day retreat convened by BID's parent company, Care Group, and their CEO, Ryerson. Levy attended and was struck by Ryerson's willingness to ask tough questions that resulted in participants accepting a plan and vision statement for where BID and the Care Group would go. Then, over the next few months, nothing happened. Just a series of excuses for why nothing was being done. The doctors didn't like this, the staff needed more information on that, etc. Care Group under Ryerson continued in this vein with a parade of consultants making recommendations and then nothing happening. As Levy so aptly put it, quote, "This was not a question of not knowing what to do. Everyone knew what had to be done. This was a failure of leadership and governance. The board of directors did not have its hands on the pulse of the organization, did not set clear objectives, and did not hold management accountable." End quote. A lack of leadership created a pattern with every 6 months came a new BID announcement of a new turnaround plan, followed by nothing. One such plan that Levy said caught his attention, and perhaps first put him on track to consider leading BID, was one in 1999 that had 3 components. Go head-to-head with other Harvard-affiliated hospitals in certain types of medicine that had high returns, create a macro collaboration with the pharmaceutical company, and sell off excess real estate. While the details of the plan are not germane to our topic of leadership, what is important is that this plan would include closing the obstetrics department and other areas that would damage the hospital's standing in the community and would have far-reaching effects on their relationship with Harvard Medical School. Yet the BID did not consult with Harvard and announced their plan to the hospital employees as they did with Harvard and the general public via the media, presenting the plan in the newspaper as a fait accompli. This triggered a meeting with an angry Harvard president and academic entourage to ensure that this type of goings-on would not happen again. It was in this meeting that Levy first confronted the lack of leadership at BID, identifying lack of measurement in the plan and even the inability of the board and management to make the decisions necessary to get to the place where this type of plan could actually be implemented. He probably needn't have said anything, for as with all of the other plans that preceded this one, it went nowhere. At least part of the leadership failures can be found in the odd BID care group structure. BID and care group were under the direction of CEO Rierston, but the hospital also had a president on the academic side. Both organizations had separate boards, but it wasn't clear who reported to whom. The BID board was quite large at 45 members, while other organizations of this size are nearer 18 to 20. Complicating the size issue is the fact that while the board was not engaged in typical board work of governance, policies, etc., they were quite empowered to embroil themselves in the day-to-day work of the hospital, undermining and undoing decisions made by the CEO and hospital president. The reporting structure was simply bizarre, and Rierston failed to lead. Finally, the BID board insisted that the care group board remove him. This, perhaps, was the only good, sound decision that had been made since the formation of the care group. Bob Meltzer, BID board chair, stepped in as interim and began actually to lead by implementing three things. Created a search committee for a new CEO, used his congenial personality to start to break down barriers between the medical and administrative sides of the hospital, and created a steering committee to help address the BID financial problems, which included impaneling a new consulting group, the Hunter Group. It is under the interim CEO, Meltzer, when BID begins to see actual leadership. When Levy joins the steering committee and hears the preliminary findings of the Hunter Group, he begins to realize that BID's problems are not medical. They stem from a lack of leadership and management. As Rainey states in Understanding and Managing Public Organizations on page 314, quote, "Whether or not leaders shape the destinies of their organizations and stride like titans over the rest of us, anyone who has served in any organization knows how much leaders can mean, fail to mean, in the apparent direction and success of an organization and in the work lives of the people they purportedly lead." Even before Levy is installed as BID's CEO, we see him begin to exert his leadership as he shapes the role and relationship with the board of directors through the interviewing process, as he asserts, 1, he must be in the job by the first week of January, otherwise there's clearly a major governance issue and he doesn't want the job. 2, the board has to get out of the day-to-day workings of the hospital. 3, the BID board must be shrunk to 15 to 18. And 4, they won't sell to a for-profit hospital. By making these requests at the board meeting them, Levy's leadership is solidified. Further indicative of his leadership is when, during his first interview, the hiring consultant asked, wouldn't it be better to come on board after the Hunter Group report is given so that any cuts, etc., can be blamed on them? Levy states, quote, "We don't want to blame what we're doing on a consulting firm. We want to do what we're doing because it's our idea," end quote. Once Levy came on board, his leadership style is consistent, and within a short period of time, he creates a reputation for honesty, openness, and inclusiveness that had been lacking. As he led the BID through extremely difficult times, he confronted issues, led and excited and energized the employees at BID. In fact, several times in his interviews, Levy states things like, "Cheerleading is part of my job," that I chose to have nursing report directly to me to give them a bump in their status. Or, in the case of the COO's job performance review, he couched what he was saying, although somewhat negative, in a positive framework. All of these things were conscious decisions to have employees follow his lead. In the end, and based on what we hear in the Levy interviews, one would have to categorize him as a transformational leader as he does clearly raise his followers' goals in a way that can be described as self-actualization and having them transcend their own narrow self-interest as they pursue the goals to ultimately benefit the BID community. Rainey, page 327. We know that under Levy's leadership, BID came out of its downward spiral, but that goes hand in hand with his management, which brings us to our final lesson. Lesson 3, management. Paul Levy had strong leadership skills that were further enhanced by his good instincts and management style. There are a few instances throughout the case where Levy states that he does something on the spur of the moment, like saying he will post the Hunter Group findings on the BID intranet. While this turns out to be an effective maneuver, this type of snap decision-making about important make-or-break items is not one I would recommend. Importantly, it works out for Levy, but that is due to his having extremely good instincts, or perhaps because more thought and planning went into these types of decisions than he describes in the case. Either way, my point here is that the instincts cannot be taught, but the concept of knowing yourself and whether your instincts are good or bad is part of good management. In his video interview on January 5th, Levy has what he refers to as a eureka moment in which he decides that he must tell the hospital employees of the for-profit threat. He believes that their knowing will motivate them to push forward with him so as not to fall victim to the threat of losing their nonprofit and Harvard affiliation status. This begins Levy's savvy management style to motivate people with details and employ all the skills and tools available to him to succeed in his objective of turning BID around. In his view, good management comes from a place of understanding the organization's core values and relating everything back to those core values. Throughout the course of the time covered by this case, we find Levy staying true to what he believes his management role is, and it works. He fills different capacities as necessary, parent, teacher, teammate, etc., all while maintaining the objective of managing the employees to the organizational goals and being honest with each employee every step of the way. The case is peppered with indicators and illustrations of Levy's employment of his managerial tools and skills. Definitely far too many to mention here, but a few that I find most illustrative and impactful are: 1. In Levy's early days as CEO, he confronts and executes necessary layoffs virtually back-to-back with the introduction of the plan to move forward. Obviously not the best-case scenario for any leader, Levy recognizes this and manages it to his advantage by sending out an email to all employees commiserating with them on their collective loss of colleagues, essentially giving them time and permission to be sad, collect themselves, and prepare to move on. This tactic quickly makes him one of them, and as well as prepares them to pivot from loss to taking on the hard work that must start immediately. 2. Levy communicates what he's doing every step of the way. However, in doing so, he carefully frames his communication to get buy-in from the various constituencies. For example, we see this come together in his February 7th video interview, where he explains how he creates an introductory letter to this strategic plan that is intended to garner support. He lays out in this letter 3 parts: that the plan is to retain their market niche as a warm and caring hospital, as that is what sets them apart from the other world-class hospitals in Boston, that they will retain their academic status so as to continue to be a prestigious place for doctors to work and teach, and a validation of the Hunter Group findings, but only those that he intends to implement. Why this modified plan will work when all of the others prior to it did not. The way he communicates with the chiefs and elicits their buy-in for the steering committee while achieving his goal of keeping them off the committee is another managerial communication tactic that he employs to his and the BID's benefit. He explains his reasoning as using them at their level and that they should be at, rather than dragging them down to the co-worker B level, where their expertise and time would be wasted. While this is accurate, he doesn't include the fact that their involvement in such things in the past has proven to be an impediment to progress. Proving that open communication does not mean that the manager has to tell everyone every single thought in his or her head, but that it should be used effectively to move the organizational objectives ahead. Levy is also clear with his employees and leadership team members that open communication is expected from them. It is, in fact, a critical communication failure by his COO that leads to her firing. As Levy explains, she was controlling of information and neglected to tell him of space master plan that had been in place since August prior to his hiring. Then, when he did learn of it, it took her more than 3 weeks to comply with his request to send him a copy. Her failure to meet the expectations of open communication could not be tolerated. One of the most striking and perhaps alarming aspects of the case is the lack of accountability that is occurring and must be addressed by Levy in order to achieve success. The succession of turnaround plans announced and never moved forward, the lack of benchmarking an original merger to determine successes and failures, the COO not achieving department goals, and even the flip comment via email by one of the department heads explaining failure to meet budget as a slow month, are all indicative of the deep-rooted problem here. Levy immediately sets goals and benchmarks for himself and the plan he intends to implement. This makes him able to measure and report on the successes the BID is able to achieve in the first few months of his leadership. By implementing small expectations for goal setting at first, like budgeting and explaining differences in budget shortfalls or gains for his chiefs, he is then able to build on those and set expectations higher as the plan moves along. In one of his final interviews, Levy states that over the next few months he would be instituting specific goals for each of the departments and their heads, which would allow for deeper understanding of successes and accurate future planning. In closing, a final lesson that can be learned from the BID case and Paul Levy is the need for transparency. I think we have all been in professional situations where decisions made seem arbitrary or cloaked in secrecy. This leads to dissension and an unhealthy work environment. In this case, Levy came into a situation where the lack of transparency was undermining anything else that was happening. By immediately opening and being transparent to all of the interested parties, employees, board members, Harvard Medical School, and the public, Levy puts himself in the best possible position to move ahead toward ultimate supported success. And in the end of the case, if not his tenure, he is able to actually achieve what the BID's original merger intended, including gains at the clinical and medical level that set them apart from their illustrative competition. Thank you.